couple weeks ago, we got a phone call that somebody had a Ferguson TO20 in their fence row that they wanted out of there. And so my dad and I went and bought it. We brought it into the shop, and unfortunately the engine was stuck. So we started taking apart the engine, and we were able to free up the pistons with some penetrating oil and a little bit of heat. We have the engine block here disassembled down to the bare block, and we are ready to have you follow along for the process on rebuilding this engine. This is a TO20 with the Z120 Continental engine, but the techniques we show are going to apply to the Continental engines that are found in Ferguson TO20, TO30, the 35, even the 135 tractors. Those do have different engines, but the principles that we show are the same. So if you have those tractors, even if you have a Case or an Oliver tractor with a Continental engine, you will be able to follow along and learn how to rebuild the engine on your very own tractor. We are going to show the removal process for sleeves, how to reinstall them, put piston rings on, measure your crankshaft so you know what size main bearings and rod bearings you need. We're going to show how to evaluate your camshaft, put new lifters in. In a separate video, we'll show how to do the overhead valve with the valve train kit. But this video is going to be so beneficial to you. I hope that at the end, you have the confidence to rebuild your very own engine on your tractor. So let's get to work. This is my dad, Dan, and he and I are going to work together on this engine rebuild. So the first step that we're going to show you here is the sleeve removal process. We have a sleeve puller here that we offer for sale. If you use a sleeve puller like this, it just helps you drive the sleeves out really evenly if you need to remove the sleeves that are in your block. So you put the sleeve puller on top, and then you can use a wood block like that.
We're using a wood block on there to help take some of the blow because this block is rather fragile on the other side where the sleeves are and on this side. So we don't want to get a big hammer in here and just go crazy steel against steel. So we're trying to salvage the block. So you ready, Rachel?
Yes. Close. I think it's hung up on that O-ring.
So I'm going to use a brass bar. I'm just going to send it the rest of the way. Ready?
Yep. There we go.
All right.
Okay, so here's a remove sleeve. This is the O-ring I was talking about that it was hung up on.
Yep.
So as you pull yours out and push it out, that's what is holding it in place, and you just got to get past that.
And this locks in the top of the block, which we'll show when we get to the other side. And you got to kind of get this. It's rusted here, and it's usually rusty here, and you got to really give it a couple good blows to get it to move. But once it moves, you can see it comes right out. Okay, Rachel sprayed some penetrating oil on my hone for me, and as I was cutting, I got it all shined up. This is the surface that them sleeves are coming down to, and the O-rings are sealing, so it's very important that this is extremely clean and smooth and ready for our sleeve.
If you don't have a cylinder hone, you can use a sandpaper, use a really fine sandpaper like a 220 or even a 320 grit. You don't want to be too harsh here, but that's another option if you don't have the hone. Also notice that we have our block very cleaned up. There was so much sludge in this engine.
Terrible sludge.
And it's really important that you get that out. We chose to use a power washer, but if you use a power washer, just make sure that you're ready to reassemble the engine very soon. You don't want to power wash your block and leave it for a month or two and come back to it. It'll be rusted away. So if you choose that route, you can. Also, machine shops will offer to clean it and put it in a heat tank. There's a lot of options available for you. But that's an important step to do before you're ready to reassemble and put new parts in. When you are ready to repair your own Ferguson tractor, you'll need some parts, and I have some of the parts that you might need on the table here in front of me. I want to walk through them to help you with your ordering. First, if you are going to buy a clutch kit, we offer this as a kit shown here, which is the disc, pressure plate, pilot bearing, release bearing, also known as the throwout bearing, and the lineup tool. Now, sometimes people will put in just a disc, and if you want to do that, it is a way to save money, but in our shop, we always put a new pressure plate and bearings in because we decide that we're here this far. Why would we want to skip those components? I don't want to split a tractor just for fun because I forgot those bearings in the future. So we put them in, but that's up to you what you want to do. Remember when you purchase your disc or clutch kit that there are two different sizes of center hubs, and you'll need to measure that to make sure that you get the right one. This is the governor. We put an updated style governor on our tractor, and we would recommend the same for you. Here is a valve kit, which is the springs, guides, the keepers, and the intake and exhaust valves. This is the pin style valve, which is the same valve for intake and exhaust for this tractor. Now, you may have rotators, that's what we found on this tractor, and if you do have rotators, you'll need to purchase rotating exhaust valves in a different style keeper. You don't want to switch back and forth. You should look at what valve kit you currently have in your tractor and then replace it with the same style valve kit that you have. And this is by far the most common valve style. If you decide that you're going to rebuild your oil pump, then this is the oil pump repair kit, which you can do yourself. And remember, we have that video that shows how to do it that's available for purchase. Or you can also take it to a machine shop, take this kit to the machine shop and ask them to do it for you. This is a tune-up kit for a Delco distributor, which is the spark plugs, rotor, condenser, and points. And we have a separate video that shows how to rebuild the Delco distributor. So if you need that, look for it. This is the oil filter for the TO20. Here we have the camshaft. If you decide you need a new one, you can order it. Upper and lower radiator hoses and a manifold. We have other parts too that you've seen us put on this tractor, like the water pump and the lifters and so much more. So look on our website for those extra parts that you see us put on this tractor. And last but not least, of course, we do offer the engine rebuild kit. This is the full engine rebuild kit that I have shown here, which is sleeves, pistons, rings, main bearings, rod bearings, and the full engine gasket set. If you decide you don't need all of those components, we do offer a lot of those as smaller individual sets. You can buy just the main bearings, just the rod bearings, just sleeves and pistons or anything like that, or you can buy the whole entire engine rebuild kit, whatever you end up needing for your tractor. All of these parts are available on our website, which is farmtractorrepair.com. You first need to figure out what engine you have, whether that's the Z120, the Z129, etc. And then you can shop by that engine for all of the components that you are going to need for your tractor. A purchase on our site does help to fund future tractor tutorials, so we really appreciate it when you make a purchase on our site as a way to help us keep producing videos. Thank you, and we'll get back to work now.
I'm trying to clean this top surface really well. I'm using a brush on the end of the drill motor here so that I can get that clean. When the head goes on this tractor, it actually pushes that down and makes a really tight seal on this. And Rachel's working on the O-rings on the bottom to get the bottom seal.
There are 2 O-rings on this sleeve, and you just slide them over into place. And then we are choosing to put a little bit of Teflon sealant around here. And I'll just show you that. Just gonna put this on here, all the way around. I'm gonna put it down here by the O-rings and also right up here at the top ledge.
This Teflon is really slippery too, so it works as to slide the O-rings on, plus seal, and plus the top seal. It's a Loctite product that we're using, available at auto parts stores, so this is the product that seems to work well for us. Rachel's gonna put it in the hole for us. I've got that sleeve puller that we use to take the sleeve out. The first little bit here, we've got to get the O-rings to go past the top. Usually just give them a little twist and make sure that you get it straight in the bottom. Again, get a little twist, and I've just about got it all the way down. So I like to do it by hand, not with a hammer. Only the last little bit are we gonna drive with a dead blow hammer. There, and you can feel it bottom out when it's there. Remove that, and now it's sealed and in the hole.
One quick tip, if you are working on a Z134 or 145 engine, you'll notice that your sleeves have little notches on them. Those sleeves are extremely directional. Make sure that you put your notches from side to side. They run perpendicular with the crankshaft. The journals, or the rods, need that extra little bit of clearance, so you have to get those side to side if your sleeves have notches in them. As you can see, we have 4 new sleeves in our block here, so we are ready to move on to the next step.
I'm just polishing up the crank here with some real fine emery cloth that I can put around here. There's a little bit of staining on this. I want to get all that staining off. The other thing I want to do is make sure that this crank is extremely clean. I'm using some carb cleaner, and I'm just putting it right in the journal hole here, the oil galley, spraying it through there. Pipe cleaners work really great. They're nice and soft. Put it right through the hole, comes out the other side, back and forth, make sure I get all the stuff out of there. And then I use compressed air for the last, blow compressed air through here, through all the journals, and get this extremely clean and polished up before I put it in the engine.
Rod bearings and main bearings are available in all different sizes, and it's important for you to measure your crankshaft to know what size you need. A lot of people think, oh, my tractor has standard bearings, but as these tractors age, the likelihood of that being true is less and less likely. So you do need to measure your crankshaft to make sure you get the right size. You need to measure both your main bearings, which is measured here, here, and here, as well as for your rod bearings, and those journals are 1, 2, 3, 4. The most proper way to measure a crankshaft is to use a tool called a micrometer, and if you have micrometers and you're familiar with how to use them, definitely use that by all means. If you don't know how to use a micrometer, you can use a digital caliper that's a lot easier, and it will still be a good way for you to measure your crankshaft. So when you use a digital caliper, just make sure when you start that it's zeroed out, and you can press the 0 button if it isn't, and then go ahead and measure. So I'm gonna measure here for my main journal. So you're reading what the measurement is. You want to measure both directions. You want to measure towards each end and in the middle to make sure that you get a consistent reading all over your journal. Sometimes these will wear out of round or a little bit oblong, so that's why you're taking that measurement all around and you're measuring every single main bearing and every single rod bearing. You don't want to measure just one and assume that all of them are the same size. We do see crankshafts from time to time where somebody just had like one journal resurface. So that's why you want to measure all across. Then, once you have your measurements, now you're ready to do a math equation. So, in your manual, you will see that there are standard measurements in a manual for both your main and your rod bearings. This is what manuals look like nowadays, and they're sold for different tractor models, so just make sure that you order the manual that matches the model of your tractor because these measurements are different between engines. When you have your manual, you open it up to the crankshaft section. This is where we read about the main bearings, and this says that the standard journal diameter is 2.249 to 2.250. So here's how the math comes in. Main bearings are available in the standard size, and then the next choice is a 10,000th size. So think about this. If your journal, when it came from the factory, measured 2.249, as it wears down, your journal gets smaller, and so then when you put new main bearings on, your main bearings need to be thicker to make up that difference so that your bearings are still tight onto the journal. So if this is a 10 thousandths, you're gonna basically subtract 10 thousandths from this number. So a good range for a 10 thousandths main bearing is going to be 10 thousandths less. So if that's standard, 10 thousandths is going to be the 2.239 to 2.240. When I measure my main journals, my measurement is 2.238. So that would be an acceptable range for the 10 thousandths main bearing. Now it is commonly accepted to have about 5 thousandths clearance. So even if my measurement was 5 thousandths less than this, which would be 2.234, you would still be allowable to have the 10 thousandths main bearing. If you get a measurement that is smaller than that, that isn't as small as what a 20 thousandths main bearing would be, which I'm going to write down the math here for 20 thousandths so that you keep seeing how that math comes down. Then you need to take your crankshaft to a machine shop and they can resurface that down to a size that is appropriate for main bearings that you can purchase. You're going to follow the same process for rod bearings. Just look in the manual for the rod bearing section and you'll find what standard is for the rod bearings, which you can see right here in my manual. Here's the renew if clearance exceeds 0.0045. That's that clearance I was talking about. That's an allowable range. So you can just do that math on down the line. Now on rod bearings, there is a size that is 0.002. It's easily confused with 20 thousandths. So 0.002, you make your subtraction in the tens column there. So you can do the math on that. On our website, when you purchase your rod bearings and main bearings, you can look in the drop-down menu and you'll be able to see all of the bearing sizes that are available. And then you'll be able to make the right choice for your crankshaft. Your main bearings have a small notch on them, and so you'll want to match that notch up with the spot for it here in the block. So you just slide those down and press them into place and make sure that they're even all the way across, that they're flush here at both points, like that. Now these center bearings you can see are different, and you'll just want to pay attention to the ones you took out and get the right bearing in the right spot. And then also when you put it in, notice that that oil hole is right there and it's open. You didn't put your main bearings in upside down and cover that up. This last bearing here is directional between the two. So this one says on the back of the bearing upper, and so this, I have the engine flipped over, but when I flip it over, that's gonna be the upper side. So you just slide that in just like that. I got that one a little off-centered, so I'm just gonna slide it to one side. It's a little stiff. Let me try to give that a gentle tap here. There we go. Now it's flush across there, and those all look good. The next step, you don't want to put these in without any lubrication. So this is Assembler's Lube, and I'm gonna be generous with it here. You just put it across all of your bearings, and we're gonna put this on the other side of the main bearings too. Slide it all the way across there. This is called Assembler's Lube. This is made by AMS Oil. We are doing a lot of work on this engine, and I don't want to skimp on this part by any means. So once you have that ready, then you can drop the crankshaft into place here. Set this aside.
We have the one thrust washer on the side here.
Now that's something that's only specific to this engine. Not all engines require that thrust washer.
Right.
So. Okay, so now that's set in there.
And I want to make sure it turns freely and there's no binding, and it does, and we have done that. So we're going to put these caps on next.
Okay, now on most engines, you will hear the phrase lock to lock, but on a Continental engine, it's opposite lock. So pay attention to your, there is a hole here that matches up. You put a little bit of Assembler's Lube on here, slide that around.
This has a little hole in the top, and the hole here in the block matches. So we got to make sure we get these on the right way. So this one goes on just like that. This one also gets the oil pump on top of it. So that's why we're not putting the bolts in right yet, because that one's going to be later.
Okay.
That one, Rachel's got it on the right way, and it's all lubed. We're going to put some bolts in there to hold this all in place. This has got our pickup tube on it, and I just slid it over to the side a little bit so I can expose these bolts. And before I put the oil pump on, I will turn this back into place. Rachel's not going to torque them down. She's just running them down a little bit tight here so that we can not worry about the crank falling on the floor or anything like that.
I'll let you finish that up. And I'll show you what down here on this side of the engine, this is that thrust washer that we talked about that is specific to this block. There's 3 holes on there that match on those grooves, so you got to slide it around until it's in the right position. Maybe if I'm square on it, I'll be able to look at it. There we go, just like that. And then this has the key slot in it. The key is on this side. It slides over just like that. My dad and I use this long screwdriver to drive out all of the old rope seal that's on either side of this cap here. We also have the new top bearing in there, and we've got Assembler's Lube on it. So we're ready to drop it down in place. You can use some RTV if you feel like you want to. Use that in addition to the new rope. I'm just gonna put it right along the edge there.
And the other side too. Yep. I got it.
See if that will just help it seal. Your new rope does not come in the engine gasket set. Lots of times a rear main seal is included in a gasket set, but not this time. You buy this rope separate. This is what it looks like. It kind of comes all wound up like a mop head. But you take it apart, and then once we get this in here, you'll use a screwdriver and you'll just stuff the rope down in there as far as you can.
And as tight as you can.
Yep. Our tappets were extremely worn, so we're electing to put new tappets in your engine. If you want to reuse your tappets, you can if yours look okay, but ours are worn right here where the camshaft rides, and the barrel shows a little bit of wear as well, so we're gonna replace our tappets. I already have 7 in the holes where you can see these. You want to use Assembler's Lube on, just like all the other parts in the engine, and then you just drop that down in there like so. The next component to put in is going to be the camshaft. Let me show you our old camshaft here. You can see that the lobes here are very worn all along. I can tell from looking at this, just in my experience, I know this is a worn camshaft. But if you don't have as much experience, you can measure your camshaft. In your manual, you'll see measurements where you can measure, it'll give you measurements for the middle, the rear, and the front, and you can use your digital caliper and see if your camshaft is within spec or not. If it's within spec, by all means, reuse your camshaft. This is a more expensive component, so if you can reuse yours, you'll save some money. But if yours is worn, it's not worth saving a little bit of money to put a worn camshaft inside your engine at all. You'll definitely want to replace it. I already have some Assemblers lube on here, so this one is ready to slide in. It just slides in from the side, and you just gotta work it all the way across here, all the way down, and then your new camshaft will be situated. Mine's bound up on something. There we go, just like that.
Rachel's got the cam in the engine, so I am going to put the gear on the front of it. You have to put this little lock on that holds the cam in so the cam can't back out. Just simply slips on there, has two small little bolts. We're going to put in the back here. The secret to them is they have real flat heads because the gear is going to go around, and you don't want these heads to catch the gear as it passes around, so kind of special ones. We have elected to put a brand new gear on. The cam was wore quite a bit, and obviously we felt the gear was wore also, and we're trying to keep all the knocks, any knocks out of this engine that we can, and gear slap and stuff like that causes engines have lots of knocks, so we can get a brand new gear. We're going to put it on. We got the new cam to match. Has a little woodruff key that goes in here, and I put it in there, and I got it to where I got it down as far as I can before I start sliding the gear on. It's in there all the way. You can see it's got a little notch in here. You got to line those two up. I'm trying to get it on without driving on it if I don't have to with a hammer, but I'm going to have to anyhow tap it on. I'm using a brass hammer. Once I got it started, it's going right on. I have a brass bar here that I'm going to drive on that. And you can see it's going right on. What I'm doing is I'm protecting the threads on the end of the cam because the governor is going to go on here, and then the nut's going to drive down tight on the governor and hold that all together. So I'm just being protective of that. Okay, it's all the way on. Now the gear's on. I don't have to worry about timing it yet. I will in a few minutes because we're going to put the gear on the end of here. Just a quick note, we had to remove this gear off the end of the crank before you can get this washer off that has the little holes in it to remove that from the tractor. So we had to get this gear off the end of the crankshaft to do that, and that became kind of a little bit of a challenge. So it doesn't really say in the book how to remove this gear, but it has threads inside here. So I just took a piece of steel, drilled 2 3/8 holes, 2 1/4 inches apart. I just simply threaded them in, set this on top of here, and as I turned the bolts, it pulled the gear right off. So once you get this gear moving, it did come off pretty good. And then I got the gear out of the way so that I could pull the washer off and pull that ring off without damaging that brass ring. We're trying to salvage that. So now we have to put it back on. It's directional, and it has a dot on this side right here. That dot is got to line up between these two dots on that tooth. So when we put it on, we got to turn the crank so that we get this all together. So we're going to work on that. We're going to put this on. We're going to drive this on. We got to get it started, so I got to put my head there and away just for a minute. Once you get this on there, you don't want to hit the end of the crankshaft, obviously. So I'm just using a piece of square tubing to drive on this. It fits over top of the end of the crank so that I can drive on it and not hit the crankshaft, and it'll drive nicely on the gear to drive it right back onto the tractor. So we're going to work at driving that on and getting this all lined up. Got to make sure that dot's out right. Here you go. Watch
I think we're lined up.
I think we are too. All right, before we get all the way in here, we've got to get these dots lined up, Rachel. We got 2 here. Boy, you got to turn the crank a whole bunch. See if you can get them to come kind of in place.
I can't see it from here.
You are right on the money right there. Let me get it a little closer, and I think we're real close.
Let me hold this back here.
You ready?
Yes. Is it perfect?
I don't know.
Yes, it's right on the mark.
All right,
Yep.
That's the idea. You got to get the 2 dots between the 1 dot. This has got to drive in there, and that'll allow us now to continue putting the front on. The governor's next.
Okay. In regards to your pistons, you have two choices. One is you can reuse your existing pistons. The other choice is you can put brand new pistons in. Now the fault with our engine is that the pistons were stuck in the bore, and as a result, when we took the pistons out, we saw a lot of rust and pitting on them. These are never pistons that I would reuse. So if you find pistons in similar condition, you'll definitely want to put new pistons in, just like we are. But there can be other faults in the engine that don't affect the pistons, and you might have a piston set that's completely fine that you can reuse, and in that case, you just want to put new rings on your pistons. So if you are going to do that, there are parameters in the book that you can follow which allow you to put your piston into the bore and measure it and make sure that they aren't too worn to be reused. So you'll want to follow those if you decide that you want to reuse your pistons. Also, if you want to reuse your pistons and put new rings on, you got to get your old rings off, which can be a little tricky to remove them, but since we're not worried about saving them, I'll spin this around so you can see what I'm doing. I'm grabbing into this gap on the ring here with a set of piston ring pliers so that they will come off. You just slide that open and then the ring comes off like this. Notice I'm wearing safety glasses. Sometimes these will spring back. Once you have the ring off, then you need to measure the thickness of the ring. You use a digital caliper like this one to get a good reading on it, and you'll do that with all 3 or 4 rings, depending on how many rings you have on your piston. And then you'll take those measurements with also the bore of the piston, which is measured down here at the skirt of the piston. And with all of that information, you'll be ready to purchase a brand new ring set. You only need to do that if you're actually going to reuse your piston and put new rings on. But like I said, we're not using this piston, so I'm not going to continue on doing that. On your piston, you have some little snap rings like this. I just took that off the back side, and I'll show you here on the front side. You just grab onto them with a pair of needle nose pliers, just like, whoops. That's why I'm wearing safety glasses, because they go flying. Doesn't matter because you're getting new ones. And then you need to drive this out. Now I should have said, before I took that off, I should have talked about the wrist pin bushing. So you want to test and make sure that your piston is secure. So notice how I'm trying to move this side to side and there's no play there whatsoever. That tells me that my wrist pin bushing, which we're going to reveal here in a minute, is in really good shape. If you have play at all, you need to replace your wrist pin bushings, which is normally done by a machine shop. I'm using a socket that is the right size to drive this wrist pin out. I'm going to drive it out towards you here, and I'm being careful to drive this through. Oops. It's coming. Whew. Okay, there we go. That was my old wrist pin. It's out. And when you remove that, it allows the piston to come right off. We want to take the piston off because this rod we're going to reuse. This is the wrist pin bushing that I was talking about that you need to make sure is in good shape by testing the play on your piston. You can see it right inside there. Look closely at the bottom of your rod and you're going to see a number there. That's important now because you have to assemble your pistons onto the rod in the correct orientation. So the number goes towards the camshaft side of the engine, and then do you see that notch that's on the piston right there? That goes towards the front of the block. So when you are assembling your rods onto the pistons, look back at your block and think about it. Think, okay, the camshaft is this way, and the rod's gonna be like this, so if the piston's like this, it'll be the front of the engine, and then make sure that you get it lined up appropriately, or else you'll have to redo this step once you get to putting them in the engine. So I'm gonna open up the vise here a little bit so that I can just, I'm not over cranking on the vise because I don't wanna damage the rod. I want it to be secure, but I don't wanna overdo it and damage it. And then you can go ahead and slide your wrist pin through. You can do this just by hand. The tricky part though is that you gotta get it lined up with the rod, and this will just slide through by hand. You do not need to drive this through. Notice how easily that pushes once I get it started by hand. And I'm just, the only time I'm pushing on the rod is here at the very end when I have to in order to get that through. Once you have it through, just make sure that it's centered enough so that you can get your little snap rings in on either side, and then your piston will be onto the rod.
Installing the piston rings, I'm going to start with the oil control rings on the bottom. Then we're going to get to the compression rings and the top ring. So the oil control ring on the bottom is the one piece, solid one first. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. I'm going to get my expansion pliers on it here. You want to be careful to get them on all the way and carefully get it over top of the piston, not to break the rings. They're fragile and they will break easily. Make sure I get it in the groove. Leave it like that for now. And this one here is going to stay like that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have a dot on it. The next one's a little bit trickier. It's a 3-piece oil ring, control ring. This one I'm not using the pliers. I'm going to put the waffle in first, and then it has 2 little locks. The locks are thin. You can't really, I'm going to say you can't break them, but hopefully not. I just start it in there, and I just take my fingers and follow the ring completely around the piston, just grabbing it and putting it into the bottom groove. So you got to get that one in the bottom first. The other lock goes right on top of that one. Same thing. I just chase it around with my fingers as I can work it around. There, I got it in the groove. So I have the lock on top, lock on bottom, and the waffle in the middle. There's your oil control rings. Next is a compression ring, and it's the cast iron one that's going to go on next. Now these are directional. They have a dot in the top and not on the other side. So the dot, I don't know if you can see it or not, but you'll see it when you get your set. The dot is on top. So I want that on top, facing up. It's the only real ring in this that has a direction. So make sure you get it into the second groove. I got it. Locks in, make sure it spins freely, and that one's in. The top one is a chrome ring. Doesn't matter which way, there's no dots, there's no bevels, so it's non-directional. Same thing, I'm just going to put that into the groove the same as I did the other one. I put my hand over it so they can't snap off. Once I get it in there, there you are. There's the whole set, ready to go.
I'm spreading a little bit of oil over these rings. And then before you put your ring compressor on, you want to spread apart the openings. See how these are lined up? Just spin that around so it's opposite and you don't have that lined up at all. Then you're ready to put your ring compressor on.
I don't put these all the way down so that I got a chance to start this piston in the bore straight. So I'm trying to just leave myself a 1/2 inch on the bottom or 3/4 of an inch to help get it started.
We have our rod bearings in and ready to go with a little bit of assembler's lube on them. Remember the number side, it goes towards the camshaft. That's that little number that you see on both the cap and the piston itself. So my dad's gonna start sliding that through, and I'm gonna sort of catch it so that it'll go around the crankshaft here. So I'm just waiting for it to come up here. So see, I'm just reaching my hand down here towards the bottom to keep it up. And we're really close. And that's it. Now when I look at it here, I'm making sure that that rod bearing didn't shift or move at all while we were pulling it through, and it didn't. So again, double checking my numbers. One thing that's kind of specific to a Continental engine is this lock right there is going to oppose. You see the lock there and the lock here, they're going to oppose, and that keeps both of the numbers up towards the camshaft side. So with that, we're ready to put both of our bolts through, and they have a little lock washer on the opposite side. We'll drive those down, or screw them down, and then we're going to follow with a torque wrench. Was it 40 pounds?
40 to 45, that's what we're going to set them
Is
at.
what we'll torque them to.
Okay. And as soon as we're done torquing them, we're just going to turn the crank, make sure that it's not tightened up or something went wrong. Right now you can see that the crank turns easily, and we're hoping that that is the answer as soon as we're done torquing this one down. Rachel's going to run them in with a wrench here, or I can, so we aren't wasting so much time with a torque wrench.
My dad and I have worked together to rebuild this oil pump. We offer an oil pump repair kit, and you should definitely consider doing that before you finish up your engine assembly. The oil pump rebuild process is a little more involved than the typical instructions that we're showing on this video. So if you're a beginner mechanic, this is probably a little more challenging than you want to get into. There's a set screw and there's 2 different types of metal, so you gotta be really careful there. There's bushings. It's really more of a machinist type job. So if you want to, you can purchase the oil pump repair kit, take it to a machine shop, they'll rebuild it for you. You get it back and you put it back on your tractor. Or if you say, Rachel, I'm a more skilled mechanic, I think I can handle that on my own if you could just teach me, then you can purchase a video that we have where my grandfather shows every step in the rebuild process. He actually uses a vise to press in the bushings and shows how to go through that process. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can consider purchasing that video that does go through the entire engine rebuild process, but it covers the oil pump in great detail. So with that, we have ours rebuilt and we're ready to put it into the block. When you slide this down, you got to kind of match the tube up at the same time. Over here on the end, the gears aren't timed, so you just got to get those in the slot. You got it started there?
I do. Trying to get it started, and then it's got a bend to it, and we want to keep the bend this way so that there's no interference with the crank.
These bolts that I'm touching right now are going to be torqued the same as the main bearings, which is 90 foot-pounds of torque. Am I right?
Yep, you are right.
Now that torque specification can vary per engine. So if you're working on a different engine than the Z120, be sure to check your manual since you might have a different spec. And that same specification for torque, you're gonna do on the main bearings here and there. We already tightened those up, and you definitely need to tighten up that center main bearing because you can't get your torque wrench underneath there once this tube is in place.
Right, and then also once we get these done, these have to have mechanics wire on them.
That's right.
So once we get this all done and put together, we're gonna go back and wire everything up. I'm gonna remove the rear seal. I'm using just an old sleeve puller that fits in here just perfectly. I'm going to drive the old seal out, and if you look, the seal is directional. On the old one, they had oil holes so that the oil would come in and not on the other side. On the new one, they do not have the holes like that. So you have to examine this and see that you can see the spring on this side, and you cannot see the spring on this side. So the spring is your oil side, so it's going to go into the tractor like that, because this is going to go on the back of the engine, and so the oil will be against the spring. So I'm just going to lay it again, flat surface here. The secret is to try to get it started straight. I'm going to put a little bit of lube around it to help slide it in there. Anything you can get to make it a little slipperier. So I got to make sure I got it the right way. I'm going to look again. I got the spring facing the oil. So I'm going to put it down here. I'm going to tap on it. Make sure I got it started straight. There we go. It looks good. I'm going to put a block of wood over it and just tap it right down flush. There you go. It's nice and flush and ready to go. I'm going to put the rear main seal on. There's a gasket on here, and it has 2 little holes that you need to line up here and over here. So I've got them. Put one in the middle. That kind of holds it so that you can swing it up here. These 2 holes on the bottom are closer than the holes up here on top, so this thing is directional. And these 2 bolts here on the bottom come through the bottom side of the block. So I'm going to work at getting this all back on the back of the tractor. I installed a new pilot bearing into the flywheel here. We had this resurfaced because this one here was all pitted, and we were worried that by the time we put our new plate on there, it would tear it up.
Also, when you're here, it's a good idea to take a look at your ring gear and make sure that that is in good condition, because otherwise you would want to replace that at this time. We're choosing to put a brand new clutch in because we have gone to a lot of work to get the tractor apart like this. So why would we skimp on the clutch and not put this
And there's such a small surface here to begin with that we want to start with a nice new surface here, new plate, and a new cover.
So this lineup tool, as you can see, it lines up the pilot bearing to the splines that are on the disc. And then the pressure plate here is, you got to slide it around so that all your holes line up. There's 6 bolts in total that you'll need. I've got mine started.
Once we get a couple of them in, that'll help line things up here. And these we do not put in with an impact wrench. We put these in, they're just little bolts, and boy, you can twist these off in a flywheel so fast that we like to bring them in slowly and not over torque these and twist them off. The lineup tool helps keep everything nice in order here, so when we put the tractor back together, it makes it a lot easier to go back together. Remove the front seal from the front of the tractor, and it's the old Chicago rawhide style with leather and felt in here, and it's much thicker than the one that you're going to get. You can see the difference in the two seals. So I'm going to put the new seal in, and the new seal is directional. The new seal has, again, a spring. You can see the spring on the back side and no spring on this side. So the spring goes towards the oil, which will be this side of the tractor. So I'm going to put it in the back. I only want to take it down to be flush. So I'm trying to get it down to where it's flush with the back, and then it has a felt seal that is going to go in the front of the cover, and the felt is going to push down inside here like that against that seal. So let me drive that seal down flush. I've got it on a good hard surface here. Again, I got to make sure I got it the right way. The spring goes towards the oil. So I got my driver here all set up. Get it started. Make sure it's nice and straight. I don't want to get it crooked. This is a one-time deal. Okay. I'll make sure I got it all the way flush. Okay, so I make sure that I've got it flush all the way around there, and I do. Got it the right way with the spring. I'm flipping it over, and it leaves that cavity in the front here for our felt. We're going to put the felt in there, and the felt will take the cavity up like that, and then our pulley, actually the pulley, will go on the front of the shaft, and this will work as a dust seal to keep the dust away from our seal.
You can see we have done quite a bit of work. We have the engine block onto the bell housing, and you can do that process as well. Before doing so, we did replace the throwout bearing, and if you need help knowing how to replace your throwout bearing, it's also called a release bearing. You can look through our channel for a Ford clutch video where we show that process, and it'll be the same for your Massey Ferguson.
Yep.
I should have also mentioned in our prior take about the clutch that there are two different sizes of clutch center hubs, so you'll need to measure the center of your disc. The choices are either 1 1/8 of an inch or 1 3/8 of an inch, so you'll want to get the right size for your tractor.
That's for sure.
So with that, when you are putting your block up to the bell housing, work carefully. You don't want to force anything at all. It should go together easily for you without any pressure.
And a trick that we did is we put the tractor in PTO, tractor in neutral, and turned the PTO shaft. That helped the spline to line up. And the other thing we did is took a screwdriver through the hole on the ring gear and turned the flywheel a little bit. And that kind of lines everything up. So we did not force the tractor and made it pop together.
Exactly. So with that, now we're ready to work up here at the front. So we're going to put a new governor on. This is an updated Novi style governor. You can see that it's quite different from the old governor that we took off.
Yes.
My dad's got the old governor, and I'll show you the new one here. Very different.
The old governor just had 4 weights that flew out and pulled the hub out of the center. And this one is in pretty good shape, but at this point, we have done this much work on the tractor. The last thing we want is a governor problem once we put this tractor all back together. So we have elected to put a brand new, upgraded governor in this. Now this governor is upgraded. It also fits the Perkins engine, the diesel Perkins engine. This governor works. You do not use this ring. All the Continental engines, you have to put the spacer in the back. In the original one, the original governor here had four little screws that screwed the weights down to the back. You do not do this with the new one. And this one, it's kind of tricky because you have to take the original nut off. The original nut does not have any collar on it. The one that comes with the new governor has this collar that locates this and takes the place of the 4 screws that were holding the original governor on. So make sure that you take the steps to do this correctly. So we're going to put that in there, and Rachel's got the nut here, and you can see the collar. It fits snugly in there, and that's what centers this governor. So you have to have this particular nut. So hold that up there, Rachel, and we'll try to get this centered in there. So Rachel's trying to keep it somewhat straight, and when I get the nut closer, we're going to make sure that it goes on that sheet metal collar. Does it feel like it's going on, Rachel?
Yes, it does.
Great. So you can see that it's on there, it's tight, it's not loose. We're going to I got a socket all set up here, and we're going to see if we can just get this tight right here while we're watching us. And it tightens down really well. Great. Now, The next important is the cover. The cover just slides in, and then the cover of the tractor, the front timing cover, actually holds this in place. So this mushroom will just slide right in the end of the camshaft like that, and this little tab has to be at the 8 o'clock position. So looking at the front of the tractor, that would be 9 o'clock, and this right here, we'll move that out of the way. This is going to be the 8 o'clock position for the cover. And you can see that Rachel and I have hunted down the gasket here for the front cover, so we have the gasket all ready to go, and we've hunted down all the bolts. And on the front cover, it has this little rod here that's actually the governor rod, and that's why that has to be at 8 o'clock, is this rod touches this, and as the governor works, it works it back and forth. The oil slinger goes right on front of the crankshaft.
This is my old water pump, and my dad and I have decided to put a new water pump on our tractor. You'll want to replace your water pump if it's leaking out of the wheat pole down here, if before it was noisy, or if the bushing inside of here is loose. Those are the 3 reasons why you'd want to replace a water pump, and since mine was leaking, then we have chosen to replace it. Also, the water pump is really important. It helps to move water through the head, and we've gone to all this work. I don't want to have a tractor that's going to have a overheating problem, and putting a new water pump on will help to ensure that it's cool. Underneath this water pump, you saw that I had my gasket already lined up there, and you'll want to put your gasket on as well. And then you just tighten up these bolts back here. I'm just going to tighten those up real quick, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, the next step is to put your pulley on, and if you look at it closely, you got to spin it around until the pattern matches up to the holes. I got to look again at where my holes are because I was a long ways off, just like that. See how my holes are lined up? And then you can next line up the fan. Again, spin that around until your holes match up, which is one pattern right there. And then once you have that lined up, you just tighten your 4 bolts through there. Your new pump is sealed with grease, so once you have your new water pump on, make sure that you put some grease here through the zerk.
We're going to put a pulley on the front of the engine here, but before I do, I want to let you know that the seal runs around this part of the pulley. So I took this pulley, I chucked it up in the lathe here, and I cleaned this up so that my seal's driving on a really nice, smooth spot of that. This is keyed, simply just goes on the front of the tractor. You have to drive it on, so I'm going to use a block of wood and a hammer to get this on, and then there's just a big washer and the nut that drives it right in all the way tight.
Next, you can put your tappet cover on with a new cork gasket. I did put a little bit of silicone on my gasket, not a ton, just a little to try to help it stick, and you can do the same if you want to. Be careful when you're setting down your gasket. See how mine kind of wants to squeeze in towards the inside. If I put my cover on with that squished down in there, it wouldn't seal, so you need to make sure that it's out on this outside edge all the way around, and then carefully put your cover on top with the gasket in place, and then there's 2 nuts on the top that will secure it. At this point, we're ready to put our oil pan on. You can do so as well. You can see that we cleaned ours out. This had so much sludge in the bottom. It was horrendous. So if you find that your oil pan needs to be cleaned, please clean it out before you put it back on your tractor. There's a new gasket, of course, which you'll want to use from your kit. And then if you have a TO20, you're gonna have that hole in the bottom of your oil pan with this plate. Don't forget about this rubber seal that goes around this plate from the bottom side. This is important and needs to be replaced whenever you change your oil, but you put a new one in now, and then of course your filter in there as well. Now if you have a TO30, your oil pan is going to look a little bit different because the filter is accessible from the outside, and you'll just follow that same step with cleaning out your oil pan, putting on your new gasket, and putting it right onto the tractor here. Just like that, we have our tractor all back together. You can do the same, just assemble all those parts back on piece by piece and get your tractor back together. Once you have it assembled, then you can add engine oil. We chose to put a break-in oil in our tractor to start with, and we'll follow the proper break-in procedure. So if you look in your manual, there's this set procedure that you can follow. It'll be, you run your tractor for such a period of time at so many RPMs, let it rest and do it again until you're through that break-in procedure. Once that's done, you drain out the break-in oil and then you put in your more long-term oil. We recommend a 10W40 oil. We're choosing to use this AMSOIL Z-Rod oil because it has a high zinc content. This tractor has solid lifters, and so this is a really good choice for this engine. However, AMSOIL sent us this to use for this tractor. This is a fantastic oil. It's really high quality, and if you choose to use AMSOIL, it'll be a good choice for you, or any other oil that's 10W40 will also be suitable for your tractor.
Oil pressure came right up. It starts right up fast, no knocks. I love it.
Yeah, we're also looking for leaks. Any unusual sounds or leaks is what you're looking for in the oil pressure. Now, if you remember back at the beginning of this video, my dad and I pulled this out of a fence row. And so when you buy a fence row tractor, there's
lots of unknowns.
A lot. And we are pleased that the hydraulics work on our tractor, but let's say you're in a similar situation. You're like, oh no, I just did all this work on the engine and now the hydraulics don't work. Don't fret, we can help you fix the hydraulics. So if you have a TO20, the hydraulic system is most similar to a 9N or 2N Ford, or a TO20 or 30, I should say. Or if you have a 35 Massey Ferguson, we have a specific video to that model, so we can help you fix the hydraulics if need be. With that, we'll wrap up this video. Thank you for watching, we really appreciate it. If you'd like to subscribe to our channel, you can. Subscribing helps us out, and it also gives you a notification when we release a new video. There's of course past videos that will be a good resource to you as well. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.